I'm Kristen Solomon, court liaison advocate with Right Turn Impact. Just last week, I was in a courtroom watching this man work, and what I witnessed reminded me exactly why this conversation needed to happen. George Psoras has spent nearly 4 decades as one of Maryland's most seasoned criminal defense attorneys. Now he's stepping into a new arena, running for Carroll County State's attorney. I wanted the opportunity to sit down and ask him the questions that don't usually make it onto the campaign trail. Let's go inside and talk with George about what drives him, his vision, and what he believes Carroll County deserves.
Good morning. Welcome to Rice Law. How are you today?
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
I have an appointment with George Psoras, please.
Perfect. Come on this way.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Here to meet the man, the myth, the legend.
Yes.
Sir, I have an appointment for you.
George, you spent 38 years defending people. What made you decide that the other side of the courtroom is where you need to be now?
You know, after traveling the state and representing thousands of people and having moved to Carroll County over a decade ago, I now look at my county and I said, my God, they are so incompetent. The prosecutors there have no training. They can't win a case. And every time I go to court, I'm prepared. They're not. So I either get a not guilty or they reduce the charges to a payable or something along those lines, or they stat or they place the charges some other way. They always drop the top count. And I said, you know, enough's enough. I've been doing this. It'll be 39 years this June. And I said, it's time for a change.
George, you've referred clients to Right Turn Impact for years. What did you see in those clients that made you believe treatment was the right call?
Well, you know, unfortunately, being a criminal defense attorney, as part of my role in the justice systems, most people come in with a drug or alcohol problem. Unfortunately for them, they're in denial. They generally chalk off their experiences to bad luck. And why do I say that? Because most people don't plan on going out and then receiving a drunk driving charge or a drug charge or getting a criminal charge. So they blame it on misfortune. It was just a bad break. But when they come in and I meet with them, we do want to see what's making them tick. If you can get to the root cause, and Right Turn does that. And when I talk to somebody, I say, there's 2 ways you can do any case. You can ignore the problem and you'll be back to see me. And I've had many, many repeat customers, unfortunately. And that's a sad thing, because if they had listened up front, they would have never come back for a second or third. You and I just last week were with a gentleman in Howard County who's on the cusp of being 70 years old. It was his 4th offense, a head-on accident. And thankfully, this was the first time I represented him. He listened, and he knew he had to change people, places, things. So I said, go to Right Turn, even though you're set in your ways, go in with an open mind. He went, he did some inpatient, then began the groups, and then he began self-help, things that he never imagined. He always blamed it on bad luck. He's not an alcoholic. He doesn't have a problem. But when you get to numbers 3, 4, and even more, you have a problem. And you were gracious enough to come simply because you noted a change. You encouraged him to go to self-help. You encouraged him that you can change. And he's still in the infancy. I mean, he's got a long way to go with regards to his treatment efforts. But if he follows the path that you guys have established, we're going to have a good outcome, not only for him, but for the community.
And what do you believe actually reduces crime long-term, and what doesn't work even though we keep doing it?
Deterrence. And how do you get deterrence? Well, when you have a repeat offender and the state's not prepared, and Carroll County is notorious for this, they can't even file the repeat offender notice right in most cases. That's a shame, because a good criminal defense attorney is going to take advantage of that. So right now our laws are, you can start as low as 1 year for an impaired for repeat offender, and it jumps progressively all the way up to 10 years. But if they don't check the right boxes, the judge doesn't have that ability to have that punishment out there. Now, obviously, I don't think somebody who is a drunk, when there's not an accident, and I call it a generic type of stop. They're stopped, for example, they're speeding, they're going 10 miles above. They're not all over the road. They then decline field sobriety tests, for example. So the most they can prove is impaired driving. Does that person belong in prison for 10 years? Probably not. Does that person belong in treatment? Absolutely. Does that person need possibly to see the inside of a jail? Probably. Because after the first one, it's no longer a bad choice, it's a problem. And that's what we have to get out there. So my personal opinion is, once you've done it once, okay, I get it. Once you've done it 2 or 3 times, there has to be a consequence. And that's when the courts, through the state, have to make these tough decisions. The state has to recommend a significant period of jail that can be modified. Because once they're in jail, unfortunately, like everything else, you get accustomed to it. I've had many a client who has gone to jail, and then once they're into the situation 2 to 3 weeks in, it becomes routine. So it's lost its punishment effect. They make friends, they call them cell buddies. So they're just warehousing them. I'm not into warehousing. I'm in for people to get treatment, punishment when necessary, and I think punishment should be really reserved for the violent people. I think if everybody looks when someone's charged with a crime, what led them to that? And my experience has always been drugs, alcohol, mental illness. They're the 3 caveats. And if we can address that on their first offense, whatever that might be, we're going to never have a second offender or a third offender or someone who commits another type of crime. Because if we can address it early, we're going to have favorable outcomes for our communities. So treatment is the only way we get there. And yes, you're going to have to crack some eggs, because not everybody that goes to treatment is going to say, I succumb to my disease and I'm ready to get the help. So sometimes that's where you have that different approach. And that's why I like the fact that Right Turn has all the various modalities to kind of get into somebody's crawl. They're bringing a speaker who has done the same conduct, and then it resonates. Because if you hear from somebody else, you recognize you're not alone and there is a solution. But unfortunately, we have to do that early. And that's part of my goal, is to help people when they come see me, so I'll have a second timer or a third timer. And for the most part, I've been successful for that. Have I had the ones that never changed? Of course. And they're the ones now, unfortunately, are doing prison or they're dead, because their disease, and that's what it is, led them to the path of destruction. So treatment's the only way we can address that. And I hope the government will have more beds available for those types of people, as opposed to spending 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, $1,000 a year to put somebody in detention when they come out the same, or even worse. As a state's attorney, could I work collaboratively, for example, with Right Turn and other programs? The answer is yes, and here's why. There are other state's attorneys that I'm familiar with on the Eastern Shore and other areas that you can have a better outcome for the defendant by them doing the hard work, by going and doing some inpatient treatment and signing up for aftercare. So yes, you can work indirectly with like a program such as Right Turn for people that want a better outcome, because they're finally ready to change. And they accept the fact that we now know I had a problem, or I have a problem that I need to address.
What does Carroll County look like differently in 4 years if you win?
Well, first thing, we'll actually have prosecutors that were trained by me and my 2 esteemed colleagues, Clark Ollers and Joe Murtha. 2 of the best attorneys I've ever had the privilege to be either co-counsel with or to have co-defendants with. Why does it make a difference? The first thing I'm going to do is change most people's experience with the criminal justice system. Seems to be in a district court setting. A DUI, for example. How do I make it better so the outcomes are better for the state and the outcomes are better for the defendant? It's real simple. In the morning docket, that prosecutor will only do that docket. They're not going to do the docket in the afternoon, because what happens is when they have 10, 12, 15 cases in the morning and 10, 12, 15 cases in the afternoon, they don't have the time to prepare. So I got to break that practice. They'll do only one or the other. Then you're able to prepare each of your cases for the best outcome for our community. Because let's say, for example, you have a lawyer like myself or a Lenny Shapiro, who's a legend here, been doing this longer than I have. We'll be ready for all the tricks with regards to trying to keep evidence out, having my officers being properly prepared, which is something that never happens today. The first time the prosecutor's meeting the police officer is when he's asking the question in the court that day. And that's a shame. That doesn't allow proper preparation, so the outcomes for the defense are much greater, but for the state, we're losing cases. You won't have that any longer because I'm changing that system. The same with the felonies. Any violent crime, whatever it is, either myself, Joe Murtha, or Clark Hollers will personally handle that case. We're not going to schlep it off on someone who's only been in the office 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or whatever the time may be. We're going to handle it ourselves. Why? Because we've tried the cases. We know the tricks. We know that way our community will be protected, as opposed to, for example, I recently had a case where the charges were horrendous. This case was a dead up guilty for them. My client allegedly, well, not allegedly because we went to trial, hit a school bus head on. What a horrific case. He's got a checkered record. I tried it in front of a jury for 3 days and I got a not guilty. Why? No preparation. On a slam dunk guilty. The state wasn't up to the challenge. That'll never happen under my watch. And that's just a recent case that occurred last month where they weren't prepared. They didn't know how to get certain evidence in. It was almost like this person had never been in a courtroom before. They had not prepared their experts. And as a result, they became my experts and actually defeated the state's case. And that's a shame, because if anybody should go to jail, it's somebody who's driving, crosses the center line, and hits a school bus head on. That's just complete injustice. And the only reason why it happened is because of the current administration. Because again, I've done too many vehicle manslaughter cases. And they're tragedies. And it's not just in Carroll County, it's throughout the state. I represented the young man in Ocean City, unfortunately. Horrible case. They did a manhunt, a witch hunt for this poor guy, and he didn't do anything wrong other than leave the scene. But they tried to make it worse. I'm not going to charge people with crimes that I can't prove. The state does that all the time, so a family has to spend all their hard-earned resources for someone like myself to defend them when they didn't even commit a crime. There was a recent case they just dropped against a firefighter. Went up to the day of trial. Family had to spend all this money, and then they dismissed the case for insufficient evidence. They knew from the beginning there wasn't sufficient evidence, but they charged the guy. That's not going to happen during my administration. If I'm fortunate enough to have the votes in Carroll County that they want change, and they actually want accountability, and they want the bad guys off the street. Prison's not for somebody who literally made a mistake. Yes, you should have someone who made a mistake be held accountable, but you shouldn't ruin their lives. You don't give those people a guilty so they can't find work, for example. People can change. The question is, do they want to change? And that's why you hold a big sentence over their head. The judges then give them the period of probation. And if they prove themselves at the end, I don't think they should be tarnished for the rest of their life with a criminal conviction in non-violent offenses. We've had other people that were defense attorneys. A lot of people, I don't like Baltimore City. However, Ivan Bates is really making a difference down in Baltimore City. His prosecutors, based on his experiences, are succeeding. For example, Our circuit court judge in Carroll County, Judge DeLeonardo, he was the state's attorney. He was a defense attorney. He did a great job for his 6 years while he was there. So yes, you can. There's a gentleman up in Allegheny County, James Elliott, who worked for Clark Ollers, honed his craft learning from Clark, then went up to be the public defender, and then he was recruited to run for state's attorney where he is today. So another defense lawyer, and do I know the playbook? Absolutely. There's nothing they can try to trick me with, despite the proficiency and the expertise of the defense lawyer. I'm coming in prepared for anything they could throw out. Lawyers, as a defense attorney, we throw pixie dust sometimes. Try to get the ball moving. That's not going to happen with experienced people. I know it won't happen to me. I know it won't happen to Joe Murtha, and it certainly won't happen to Clark Ollers. That's how you're going to get better outcomes and accountability. Carroll County should not lose as many cases as they do. But unless we do something different, they're going to continue down that path.
Well, I certainly think it would make you a well-rounded state's attorney.
Well, I hope so. I mean, look, I'm going from making money to not asking for a salary. Very few people can do that, but I've been blessed. They say all I've done is criminal work. That's simply not true. I did a lot of injury law practice. I represented people that were harmed by hospitals, doctors, by individuals that I've been able to hold accountable, and that's where I made my money. Criminal law, no one gets rich on criminal law, despite the fact they're running negative ads against me right now saying, I've made all these millions on criminal. I've done well because I work hard and my clients demand a good outcome. The only way you get a good outcome is preparation, experience, and knowing your way around a courtroom, which right now we don't have in Carroll County. You know, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be about me. I'm looking for my community, but I can make a difference because I want to make a difference. I want my community to be the safest, not only in the state of Maryland, but in the United States. So I'm going out on a limb to say Carroll County, Maryland will be the safest community anywhere. And people are going to be encouraged to move there, bring their families there, and know if something happens, there's going to be a consequence. I became a lawyer back in June of 1987. So it'll be 39 years in less than a week. I'll be celebrating 39 years. I never thought I'd be working this long, but enjoying it. I started out my family. My family, for the most part, are nothing but attorneys. My brother Greg is an attorney. My sister Cynthia is an attorney in Manhattan. So if my father was an attorney, my uncle was an attorney. So I ended up in what I call the family business, basically. I started work for my uncle, George Psoras, God rest his soul. He taught me the importance of hard work and relationships. It's not always what you know. You have to know the judge on the other side as to how to prepare and present your case, because you're going to get different approaches from the different individuals that are calling balls and strikes, the judiciary. So even the judges that I may not favor, I know how to approach them because I learned from the best, my Uncle Dennis. And then I admired other lawyers, for example, Richard Karseski, Judge Robert Steinberg, Judge Bobby Cahill, Judge Jan Alexander, and then traveling the state and seeing judges all around. I picked up just little pieces. I pick up a nugget of knowledge everywhere I go. So certain things you might think of saying, you can't say in front of certain judges, but you present it differently and then you get the outcome. So going to school, I didn't know I was going to be a lawyer, but it became part of the family pact. Helping people has guided me because if you think about it, all my customers and clients were from referrals. To me, that's the biggest thank you. I don't have to do $1 worth of advertising, and I haven't. I never needed to because lawyers refer their clients to me. Because I learned by preparation, you have the best outcome. And there hasn't been a lawyer other than my partner, Joe Murtha, that's out-prepared me in a case. And that's why we win the cases they call that are impossible. So, being from a criminal background and personal injury, meeting people at their worst times, because let's be candid, most people when they come in front of a judge, that's the worst thing they've ever done. And I don't think people should be judged by that worst thing unless they're violent predators. And if you think of it that way, I've represented some of those violent predators. And yeah, I'm not proud, and I've represented them to the best of my ability, where instead of them getting first degree, they get manslaughter. And that's a shame. Why? Because the state prosecutors in those jurisdictions, including Carroll County, simply weren't prepared. So my whole motto is preparation leads to good outcomes. And that's why I want to be the state's attorney in Carroll County. My client made me this as a thank you for his good outcome.
Wow.
And he's changed his life. Another client got me this. I'm far from any of those things other than I am a man. I'm not a myth, but sometimes I try to be. I'll never be a legend. And then the best chief judge ever I had was Judge Turnbull, Baltimore County Circuit Court, who taught me when to shut up and when to present a proper defense.